girls, and welcome to Season 3 of the Hey Girl podcast with my mom, Bethany Needham. Each week, guests will share their amazing stories of following Jesus on all kinds of journeys. I hope their stories inspire you to run your race in your place. Thank you so much for listening.
If you've ever heard me use the term bestie and not even remember to say a name attached to it, I was referring to Shauna. We met long ago. Okay, hold on. It was what, 2001?
Yeah.
I graduated.
Fall of 2001. Yeah.
Yes. So I was 17, went to Bible school. We met in Bible school. I'm going to let you share your side of the story first because I'm being a good host. But then I fully plan to object and give my side of the story to counter your interpretation.
So Bethany and I met at New Brunswick Bible Institute many moons ago. I became friends with this guy and girl who later were married. All we talked about was mostly theology and philosophy. And I loved it. Guys, girls, what are we? I just love. I still do.
Listen, stop
18
trying to
years later.
Stop building up your side. Just explain when we met. Okay, love at first sight.
But here's the thing. There was this short, blonde, freaking bubbly girl who I couldn't handle being around. And her name was Bethany Faith Levins. And this is where we probably stop my side of the story and you're going to give your side of the story.
Okay, so we met in Bible school and always feel the need to tell people that, because it's true, we were not friends when we met. Now, I don't want to say that we were enemies. I just want to say that I was an incredibly good judge of character and I knew who were healthy, positive people to invite into my life and who needed to work through a little phase I like to call the down and dreary. Because my memory of Shauna from freshman year was her sitting around with, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and say the deep thinkers. But I feel like it felt a little emo, like they always seemed a little moody, never really, you didn't see them and you're like, oh, let's go have a good time with those guys. You were like, I basically sat through a theology class and don't need another one. So I'm going to go hang out with other people. Now, for the first time in history, I will give Shauna the total benefit of the doubt in that I was 17 and I didn't even know who I was, but I definitely...
Pause in this. You were 17 and the youngest of 5 kids and a pastor's daughter.
Yeah.
You were set loose. And BBI.
Yeah, it's not really a place to be set loose, but I was definitely very obnoxious, high energy, class clown, whatever, like for sure. Absolutely. But I was fun. Girl, you missed out on a good time. But lucky for you that we had mutual friends. I think it was in a friend's dorm room that we came together and realized that.
I'm so proud of you. You remembered.
I know.
It was Heather's room. Hi, Heather McCrail.
What up? See, I was thinking Jess Subas, but I don't want to get lost just on this one, part of the story. But I will say that there will be a theme throughout this episode where Shauna will remember everything and I will remember nothing. And that's actually real life, people. It's part of how this relationship works.
Yes. At first, Bethany used to say it's because of trauma that she's experienced. And actually could be partly true that like memory just is not her strongest suit and probably for good reason. But unfortunately, it's entered into life itself. She doesn't have the best memory. And then there's me that I never stop thinking. My brain is always on. So to me, I don't understand how she forgets things.
I have all the positive and negative sides of memory loss. on a positive sense. Seriously, positively. I don't know how to say that. I don't hold grudges because I don't remember. I'm not even kidding when I said, and I won't name names because whatever, someone reached out to me not all that long ago, and in their message said something to the effect of like, I didn't really know if you would want to talk to me. And I was so confused. And I was like, wait, why would I not want to talk to you? And they basically like relayed this memory of why I should be hurt or offended by them or something. I'm not kidding. Zero memory. I was like, yeah, none of this is ringing a bell. So that's where it's positive. Where it's negative is when your best friend comes to you and is like, let's record a friendship podcast. And then your friend is like, yeah, we should talk through these like really important monumental moments in our friendship. And I'm like, yeah, I got nothing. No memory.
I literally had to say to Bethany, you're going to have to pray that God reveals some of the past to you, because I cannot look like a total jerk and self-centered person for this entire podcast, which honestly, usually it's me that's the jerk in our friendship, but
well,
not always, darn it. Not always.
This is probably the time to tell you that God did not reveal those memories. I am sorry, but he did not. He chose not to answer that, or he answered it in a different way. How do we say that in Christianese? He just didn't give you the answer that you were looking for.
Oh my gosh. We need to move on
before you lose it. Okay. So, men in Bible school, the big question that's often asked, and that's really ultimately why we're talking, is what does really healthy girlfriend relationship look like? To have a friend in your life that, and we joke and we laugh, and honestly, that is a big part of our friendship. But I think that isn't necessarily what people are, I don't want to say drawn to, but most curious about is actually, I would say, the depth of relationship. That this isn't, we don't have a friendship for 18, 19 years because we've just laughed and had a good time. Like in those years, as much as I joke about having a terrible memory, we've gone through a lot of junk. We've walked through hard stuff. We've had to have and receive hard conversations. We have both been jerks and made mistakes and said things the right way, said things the wrong way. And we're still here. Like, we're still here as friends who, you live in Maine, I'm in Massachusetts. One of the things that may or may not be known about, like, we spend Christmas, like you come and spend Christmas with my family. Like, this is not even like a disconnected friendship. I would dare to say we almost talk about every day. Thank you, Voxer, or close to anyways. Yeah. Let's go there. So we met in Bible school, right? So we were kids. A lot changed very early on. In fact, we were commenting as we were kind of reminiscing that one of the first kind of funny things about the fact that we are friends now and an early memory is you, first of all, were the first person that I told after I got engaged. Like, literally the first, jumped out of the car, the screaming, the everything you imagine kind of thing. But then you didn't get to be in my wedding.
Which, just for the record, I never asked to be. I would have never put myself forward that way. But I do remember thinking, oh, I kind of wish she had asked me. Like, we spent that summer working at the same camp, all those nights sitting and crying, and you crying, not me at the time.
That's right. I was the crier back then.
You were the crier back then.
Very sure. I wasn't on my meds yet. But then the backstory being, I always had this guilt and this weird, like, I cannot believe of all of the people that didn't stand with me on my wedding. Now, you came to the wedding. I should probably say that first, but who didn't stay with me at my wedding was the friend that I actually, like, we stuck together past Bible school. Cause ultimately I was, and we mentioned it in Bible school, hypersocial. So when it came to me getting engaged and married right out of Bible school, I still had this connection with this whole slew of Bible school friends and whatever. And so what ended up happening was I was up to about 7 bridesmaids, I think. And Andy was like,
Makes me
okay.
panic.
Which now it's funny because I actually am different than I used. Like it would be so different now, but back then I was just like, I need everybody in my wedding party. And Andy was like, okay, we stop at 7 because I legitimately am going to have to go to Rent a Friend if you keep adding bridesmaids. Yeah, Shauna didn't get.
Shauna never
became a bridesmaid. But I will say one of the sweetest memories out of that is you were still one of, and this is true to your personality, one of the most attentive and like selfless people in that whole like night before my wedding, day before, like of all of my and this isn't a slam on my bridesmaids whatsoever. Yeah. I don't want it to sound like that, but like some crazy stuff happened like the night before, which always happens, right? You plan and then stuff happens. And you were the one that was just like problem solving and just like, okay, I'm going to go with you. You're going to go to bed and you're going to get some sleep. I feel like you played with my hair. You sang to me and like all the other bridesmaids went out partying with the groomsmen. Yeah. And you were like, we're going to make sure you get a good night's sleep. And da, 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 da. You were like totally the mother hen, which I was like 12. So it was perfect. But I say that not just as like a sweet story, but I feel like that is a good example of your side of this friendship. And I know you were super worried coming into this. Like, I don't want to seem like a jerk, like in some of the stories. And I messaged you back and was like, oh, no, it's actually quite the opposite. Because one of the things that I will say for people who are like, how do these things work? Like, how do friendships work? Neither one of you is going to be perfect. You're both going to make mistakes. Like, there is no perfect friendship. To me, the make it or break it things that you bring to the table, and we joke Enneagram, but it's totally part of your Enneagram, is your loyalty and the servanthood that pours from that. Like, you have been someone over all these years that has always stuck by me, even when I didn't have the energy or bandwidth or whatever, even like awareness to press back into that friendship. You were just kind of like, well, I'm still here. Like, yeah. And that honestly has been a big stabilizing factor for friendship. So I would say, first and foremost, I'll put it out there for people, there's work involved. Also, there has to be some level of loyalty, like where you're really sticking by someone. And I do think there's been seasons where that's been the opposite, where I've stood by you when you were wrestling with things. But ultimately, I would say that that is more naturally your giftedness than mine. Would that be fair? I think so.
Yeah. I mean, this is backstepping a bit, and I've never told you this story. But,
oh, dear.
No, I remember there was a night, you actually might remember this, the night before speech, and you were to deliver a speech. And so one of the things with speech class was you weren't allowed to change your topic once you handed in your outline. And a few of us were in Bethany because we were friends by this point. And she's like, I don't know, I think I'm supposed to change my speech. And we're all like, oh yeah, you fail if you change your topic. But then Bethany went on to tell us, and like her speech was going to be about basically men respecting women as sisters first and foremost, because that's what we are. And I remember listening to her, and I probably said it out loud, but being like, that's worth it if you fail. Like, our guys need to hear that. But I remember in that moment being like, this girl is always going to be in my life. And so I think I kind of had that with me. And as much as, so if you haven't figured this out, y'all, Bethany is a 7 on the Enneagram. So if you think of joy from inside out, that is her. Like, yeah.
The best part is I can't show you because it's on. I have joy, the joy sticker from that movie on my computer, staring at me all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm like the theme of the movie where I'm teaching her it's okay to feel these feelings. That's why God brought me in her life. I mean, out of college, you got married, you had a kid. I moved to Southern California. Like back then, cell phones were barely a thing. And then I moved back and stuff. And I think a part of it is what kept her and I close even in those few years was, despite her being bouncy and joyful all the time, is she was a very open person. And she had to be. And she had to tell things to someone, and I was that safe person for her. So I think that's one of my biggest encouragements, I think, to women, because we don't want to. And I'm super thankful we started our friendship the days before social media, like where we just see all these things, and you know, we just had to be present. Or sometimes it would be 2 or 3 months go by and we'd make a phone call, you know, or something like that. And you know, but when I came to visit, like, I played with your kids, I slept in their room on the floor. Like, we're not just friends because we're in different seasons of life. Like, I actually hate that word season, but like, I'm still single, but I don't believe that it doesn't mean that it's possible for like women who are married and have kids to just not, because it's not about necessarily the time that you spend together. It's just being able to be free and to be real. And we'll probably talk into that, because that means the good times. It can mean just sitting and watching a movie and not saying anything to each other. Or it could mean, you know, hey, I've seen this tendency in you and it's not fun to be around.
Going off of that, we have definitely had a few of those moments, which are the ones that I don't think anybody loves in friendships. And sometimes I'm actually surprised at how many people, if I ever talk to them about having hard conversations where they're like, that like overwhelms me, the idea of having that conversation. And I was like, well, ultimately, you can't really have real depth and just a real relationship if you're not also willing to have those hard conversations. And it doesn't really matter how good the relationship is. The conversations are never easy to have. Like, if you're waiting for the stars to align and everything to work out, like, you're never going to have those conversations. And those have gone back and forth. And some of them, the one I think that is probably the least sensitive in terms of like, there are ones, and we'll probably talk about them, that we've had that legitimately still are now like, oh, that's painful. But the one I think of that I'm like, it really wasn't a big deal, but you've brought it up, which is really the only reason I remember it. You were definitely hanging out with people that were using different kinds of language.
Oh, yeah.
And
sorry, I don't say that like I'm proud.
I know. Oh, yeah. No. But it's like, and I'll be dangerous to say this, but like, I honestly am not even easily offended by language, to be perfectly honest. Like, that is not something, it's not a hill that I die on with people at all. But in your case, for a while, it got to where like you were so frequent with this language that it was like out of character for you. And I wrestled with it for like a short time. Like, should I say something? Because honestly, again, I'm like, it's not like I'm really offended by it, which people might be offended that I'm not offended by it, but whatever. Send it to my, I don't know, email, whatever. But it was something where, as a friend, I was like, this just seems like not you. Like, something is actually influencing your normal.
Yeah.
And that was one of those moments where I don't even, to be honest, I don't remember the specific conversation. I just remember maybe just.
I remember where I was in my apartment.
You don't.
Yeah. It's in my Jaffrey apartment. Yeah.
Okay. So, now you have to tell the story, because I don't remember.
I don't remember all of it, but Bethany called. It was an evening conversation, which is actually weird for us, but she was just like, hey, I need to pause and say, for the record, the people I was hanging around were quote unquote Christians. So there we go. But she was,
again, I make no judgments. It just, for you, it was not.
Oh yeah, no. Fair. And it wasn't me using it to emphasize a point. I am someone who can struggle with language from like when I was high school years, but basically she didn't make it a big thing. She was just like, hey, so do you hear yourself a lot lately? She's like, but I mean, she said it in like a positive, like, do you hear that you're like swearing like a lot, like every few sentences kind of thing. And I remember in the morning moment being like, oh crap, she's right. And I wasn't at that point, I wasn't offended. I think.
Yeah. You didn't like I remember you weren't like mad. You were just like, oh.
Yeah. But I remember that.
But that's kind of
all of our fights, Bethany.
I know. But I figured I'd start soft with like, sometimes it's just as simple as that. And like, and you've done that for me sometimes, whether it's, hey girl, like you've been talking about the same thing. And generally, let's be real, it's about me setting boundaries. Like Bethany, for the love of all.
When were we supposed to start this podcast tonight?
Shut up.
2.5 hours ago? Oh, okay.
Let's just go there. I have moments where I get better and I'm like, I am growing and I am maturing. And then like 2 hours later, I screw the pooch. I hate that term. I blow it completely. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? So one of my issues that is, if anybody who knows me more than an inch deep know this of me, I am a yes person. I am terrible at boundaries. It's awful. Like it's awful. And I am self-aware. And again, I work on it, but it just is like this thing that keeps coming back to haunt me. Tonight being an example, we were supposed to record at 6.
Oh, well, actually we were supposed to do this Saturday, but that's besides the point.
Wait,
it's Monday, guys, ladies. Yeah. It's Monday.
Okay, I'm just going to own it. I have terrible boundaries. So here's the thing. Friendship, having hard conversations. Now, let's go here with your memory, not mine. What if you have, so I just gave an example intentionally of one where maybe I handled it well. And honestly, I'd say 99.9% of the time you talk to me about boundaries, you handle it well. But what about those times your friend comes to you with a legitimate thing and they suck at the actually addressing it? Let's go there, shall we? Oh, how about when I did that to you? Yeah, let's start there.
Well, I was going to give an example of another positive time you did something well.
Nope, we can
end with the positive.
We'll Oreo cookie this bad boy.
Yeah, so
positive, negative, positive.
Bethany and I, it was 2013.
Oh my lantern, your memory.
Bethany and I had been friends for 12 years. I was living with the Bylers. That's part of why I remember, because I remember the week from hell. So here's what you listeners need to know is my heart had been broken and I did become selfish in my grieving, because at this point we were pushing like 6 months, 8 months of just a dark place for me. And I still I thought this was somebody I was perhaps going to marry. And I just began to dwell on it instead of pushing through it. Really became selfish and insecure. You know, Bethany at the time, she was gaining, like, this was kind of around like when Jen came into your life and Christina come into your life not long before that. And Bethany's brother-in-law was getting married and Kenzie had asked Bethany to be a bridesmaid. Now, the thing was not that I was jealous that she was asked to be a bridesmaid, but I just felt like all of Bethany's time was spent into that. And I also just felt like Bethany wasn't responding as much to me, which was true. But it was actually because Bethany was trying to create boundaries in her life. And I just wasn't a safe person for her to be. Your counselor would just be so proud. But that was also a part of it. Which I'm pretty sure you won't be offended. So Bethany had just started seeing a therapist. And so they began walking through and talking through things. But I now know this, but one of the things her therapist had said was like, don't confront Shauna yet. Like, you need to kind of like talk. We need to walk through this more. Basically I remember it was a texting thing and I could tell you were real angry. And anyways, and then I got really angry and defensive. And then Bethany and I, she was youth pastor at the time, and we sat in her office one Sunday night, and she just let me have it. And a part of what I haven't shared, it was literally just a few nights before, the Lord really convicted me on it. And I say that very honestly, like it wasn't just perfect timing, but it's one of those things where I was like, I just knew I needed to change my behavior. I wasn't necessarily going to go to Bethany and be like, I'm a new person, you know, because it just doesn't happen that way when you're in like literally what feels like the depths of despair. So she doesn't know this, that I've been rebuked by the Lord and trying to now walk this out. And 48 hours later, Bethany unleashes, honestly, how selfish of a human I was.
But not graciously.
Not graciously. And with a lot of anger. And then that meeting ended with me basically just saying, okay. And I got up to walk out, and the Bethany, her fiery spirit is like, what do you mean you're walking out? You're not going to say anything? And I was like, well, I need to process everything you've just, it was so from God, because I was just like, I remember being like, I need to process everything you just said. And I don't want to react the way that I just had to listen. And I walked out the door, and she was steaming mad.
So sorry. It's not funny. Why am I laughing?
I really thought, you might have thought this too, like 12 years of friendship, we thought was, I thought that anyways. I mean, we were both I'd really been a horrible person. And she
thought that really, it was over.
Yeah. She was really angry. And I've never walked through anything of that level, because at that time in my life, I was a bridge burner. So things in life I would tend to walk away from. As much as I'm a loyal person, there were things and people that I'd rather walk away than walk through hard stuff. I had never been through that before. So
yeah. And part of why going into this, Shauna's like, oh, I don't want to feel like the jerk in it, is I remember bits and pieces of that season. Like I know this is terrible. I do remember my counselor really challenging me about our friendship and feeling like, okay, this is not, there's something very unhealthy here, and you need to recognize that. And I remember, so basically what happened was she kind of opened my eyes to that there's something going on here that needs to be addressed. But I had neither the maturity nor, shocker, the boundaries to actually know, like, so now what do I do with that? Like, now that I know, oh, okay, I will say it this way. What Shauna was going through was legitimately difficult, but my wiring, this is where friendships can become dysfunctional, is like my wiring is to give, and not draw boundaries. And just because you were going through something that was like, take, it suddenly flipped a healthy friendship into a really like dysfunctional kind of, but then it became, which again, the dysfunction of being someone that gives and doesn't draw boundaries is you become resentful and you're tired and you're like, what in the world? You just keep taking. I was the one doing it, but it's almost like you become resentful at the other person. What's crazy when I think back of it, and again, this is how God, I don't know, whether it's grace in my life or just part of my fallen nature, but I honestly, like, we walked through that. We did, obviously, our friendship ended up, I feel like there was like a break, and then we kind of slowly kind of came back together in a much healthier place.
Do you want me to tell this story?
Yeah, because
you don't remember?
Because I'll be honest, like, even as you're sharing that, the pieces of it that I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it's 100% true. I barely remember Peter and Kenzie's wedding and like the whole being like, I know I was the bridesmaid. I remember doing hair the day of the wedding, but like, I don't remember any of that being tied to what was going on with us.
Yeah. So it was actually 1 week later. It was like the next Sunday night that you and I, because was I a youth leader then? I think I was a youth leader. Awkward. You work for your best friend and she's the youth pastor. I think you were like, we need to talk. And I'm like, oh, I can't do that again. Or I think I was ready. You know what? It might have been me. I like knew there were some things I wanted to say. And so I went in really calmly. And that's when I explained like, hey, yes to all of that you said. I was just, the Lord had just convicted me. I just hadn't told you, because at that time, how do you tell? Whatever. And then I honestly don't remember. This is probably a good thing. I don't remember all the hurtful stuff you said. But then Bethany, I was like, okay, now would you like to share? And Bethany started crying and was just super like, I can't lose 12 years. Like, she was just really gracious in her words and just very like, I love you and I appreciate you and I can't lose you. And so we were like, all right, well, this is cheesy, but basically like, let's still just be friends. And then I remember Monday morning, I think it was Monday, I'm assuming it was Monday morning on the way to work, because this is what Bethany and I have done for like 10 years now, is we call each other when we're on our way to work. And she called, and I think you got my voicemail though. And it was like, all right, I'm just going to be the first one and just start the awkward conversation because we're going to still be friends. And and that's that. And then we pushed through a really awkward, probably a few times hanging out, but we did it.
And honestly, that's kind of, I think about when people like, how do these things work? And people tend to ask during the cutesy moments of us like, oh, happy birthday or happy 18 years of friendship or whatever. But then the reality being, any long-term relationship, there's work that goes into it. Like it's the same in friendship. Like it takes both people willing at sometimes to forgive and at sometimes to ask for forgiveness. And I think that's one thing for the two of us. If I could think of a couple of things that mark our friendship that I'm most appreciative of, and when I think about what I would hope for anyone, especially those women out there who are like, gosh, I just want to have a really good friend. One, I would say, is the safety aspect. Like, you are my safe person. And I would think like vice versa. We know more about each other than probably anyone else in our lives, save Jesus Christ himself. There is something in that for you to be able to, you are someone in my life that it doesn't matter whether it's over Voxer, phone, you're at my house. There's no show. There's no like, I'm fine. Like it's just so far beyond that. But you're also someone that I feel like I can even be wrong or showing up in a bad way. And there's grace from like that. Not that you're never going to call me out and that I'm a wreck, but there's just grace in the friendship. Like we've said this before, like we can hang out and not talk at all. There's work when there needs to be work, but there's also not just constant drama, because I also think that's a dangerous thing in friendships where your common denominator is the drama that you bring into the relationship. And that's just the whole relationship. So I would say that. And then the other one is the willingness to have hard conversations, and not just for the sake of having hard conversations, but ultimately at the core of it is the desire for each of us to grow. Like I know for you that your desire for me is to continue to grow closer to Jesus. And even hard conversations, it may seem like it's about whatever, I'm speaking this to you because it impacts our friendship, but ultimately it's, hey, this is something that you need to be right with God on. Like this is something in your character and your development, and just that willingness. To me, those are two huge things. And I would just pause to say, for women out there listening who even are like, forget this, I have nothing like this in my life, is that these are the kinds of things that it's okay to pray for, like to ask God, bring these people. I need these friendships in my life. Like, can you bring somebody into my life? And then recognize the fact that they're not your therapist. Like the friendship is a mutual thing. Like in order for it to be an actual friendship, both parties have to be actively involved in that. I have to switch gears because there's something else I was thinking while you were talking that I don't want to miss out on. And not to put you on the spot, I'm sorry. But one of the things that we have been asked about, and I think that it is a part of our testimony, your testimony is, as believers who I am talking about, like when you point each other towards Jesus, what do you do when one of you walks away from the Lord?
Oh, that's what I was going to say. You did real well.
Oh, yay!
That's right, listeners. It was me again.
It was Shauna.
And ironically, just the year before all of that just happened. If you've listened to this podcast till now, you know that I went to Bible school. Bethany got married after 1 year, and I stayed for 4. Just always involved in church and worship leader, blah, blah, blah. One thing led to another. And by that, I mean, casually stopped doing my devotions, maybe every now and then, all these little steps, and ended up walking away from the Lord. There was this tug of war in my spirit where I still felt guilty and would try to do kind of the right thing, as in like try to want God. I really tried. A part of my story involved a boy. I was just so insecure that I just wanted that attention over wanting to do the right thing. And so again, but it wasn't just that, like my heart became hardened through a series of steps away from the Lord. Bethany, a couple different times, tried to be like, yeah, what you doing? And then I remember there was a night we were sitting across from each other in her living room, and she was just like, I just feel like I'm watching a freight train about to derail, and I can do nothing to stop it. And I remember I had tears too, because to be honest, it wasn't that I didn't care about her opinion. It's that I wanted something else more. But I remember her saying the words, "This is the last time I'll bring it up, because after this, it's the Lord. Like, it's the Lord that's going to have to do the work in you." Just about then, I walked away from the Lord completely for a few months. And
so really, I didn't do a good job.
No, well, no, that's not true, because I think you could have walked away from me. And I think, like, even I, who walked away, I wish you could see my hand gestures right now, listeners, but like, even I who walked away from the Lord, I have a very hard time without like wanting to be like, what are you doing? Like, I'm just done. Like, I put the towel in, like, that's my whole bridge burner. She tried, but she also wasn't going to leave me. And I knew that. Like, our friendship would just take a different turn. Like, it wasn't going to be as deep, and it wasn't whatever, but she wasn't going to be like, well, I can't fellowship with you anymore. And unfortunately, in many circles that you and I have both been involved in, there are people who will be like, I can't hang out with you anymore. People still believe that that's what Jesus would have us do. And those moments where you look at those disciples, like, call down lightning. And he's just like, no, you're wrong, but hey, come still follow me, or like, Peter, why'd you cut off his ear? Jesus is just like, no, like, I'm still with you, and you're still with me. But you also didn't necessarily gloss over everything either. Like, I just felt like you brought a lot of wisdom into that whole part.
Well, and I will just say, like, you're making me sound incredibly eloquent, but for those people listening that are like, how do you do that? Like, who maybe are watching a friend go through that, or they have a friend in that, whatever. That was an incredibly difficult season for me to know the right thing to do. Actually, weirdly, the temptation was never to walk away from you as a friend. What was hardest for me was actually what you just said, was being able to say, I'm not going to keep bringing this up. Like, I'm going to say it because I feel like it needs to be said. Like, I don't ever want you to get to the end of this and be like, I can't believe you never cared enough to say the hard thing. Like, I need to say the hard thing. At the same time, it's not going to help our relationship or you whatsoever for me just to keep harping on the thing that, honestly, like, that part was so hard because, and we won't get into all of the detail, but like, watching you take that path and knowing, well, first of all, not knowing if you would ever turn back, but secondly, like, not knowing all of the ramifications in terms of like how you would be hurt, the risks of the things that you were choosing, all of these things, like, just completely were tearing me up inside. At the same time, I'm like, I just need to love her. Like, I need to be here so that moment when the light comes on, or she just has that, like, whatever, and God gets a hold of her, that I'm still on the other end of the phone, that she hasn't burned that bridge. I was in Washington, D.C. or on vacation. Hey, look at that memory. When that call came and you were in tears. And I just knew when I picked up and I could hear you on the other end, I kind of knew what had happened. Like I knew, but I also knew there was nothing I could do before that moment to keep that from happening at the same time. Like it needed to happen for you to really like take a turn or whatever. And then that moment was almost like this, like I could breathe again because I was like, okay, she still called. Because honestly, the worst case scenario is like you go through all of that. You're like, I want to go back to God, but like, I've got nothing. Who do you call? Who do you go back to? I guess I say that more for like the friends who Shauna's making me sound like this eloquent, like I'm distraught. And it was turmoil. Maybe on the outside, I seem calm and like I knew what I was saying, but on the inside, it was like a complete battle not to A, slap you, no offense, B, shake you, or C, lock you up in the basement until you agree to make better choices.
Well, if you want more details of that story, you could go to season 1 of Hey Girl and listen to my story.
That's true. You do tell your story.
So one point is that if you want to have really close friends, you have to be a really good friend. I think I will say that is one thing that both you and I have in common is we are always wanting to grow. If you just want to be flashy or if you just want to look good on Instagram, which I feel like I'm shaming the female race, and I don't mean it this way, but it's
the entire female race.
It's a stereotype for a reason. Then you're just always going to have that shallowness. But if you want the close friendship that Bethany and I are talking about, we had to work, but that wasn't just with each other. That was grueling, quiet times with the Lord. You and I never settled for where we were. We were always trying to, for the most part, get to know God better. For me, I think for you, this is I hope this kind of stays on the same topic. But with someone like Bethany,
oh gosh,
she has a hard time being present. But so one thing I think I have become better at in the safeness of our relationship is being like, hey girl, who are you texting right now? Or like, what are you doing right now? Like, but for me, I also have had to learn how to, I say that in our friendship, she's the one that forced me to have the hard conversations. And I guess like that's just always encouraged me to have them. But she just brings a lot of joy to my life.
Oh my gosh.
You know, because listeners, you don't know about the moments that she made me sing to a server at Not Your Average Joe's because she thought the server liked me and thought I should know I was talented. So she literally made me sing.
What are friends for? He needed to hear your beautiful voice.
Or when you made me meet Aaron Keyes and I was scared out of my ever-loving mind to meet this really famous person who I now call friend. But at the time I was like, no. She literally locked arms with me, y'all, and made me stand behind a person during a very serious conversation he was having with them. There's just a lot of things Bethany does well, and I've learned from. Sometimes I still hold them against her.
All right. As we kind of come to the end of this, especially in recent years, I have come to an incredible appreciation for our friendship because the older I get, the more I realize that that's not necessarily the norm for people to have that in their lives. And so I appreciate it, but it also makes me want it for more people. Like you need this person in your life. Now, I do think, and I'll just say that we were spoiled in that we got to meet in college. And so there's kind of this history bonds us in some sense. But also I do know that we've put in a crap ton of work on this and it's not ever been, nor will it ever be perfect. But I would say little things like, and you've mentioned some of them, being willing to put yourself out there and be vulnerable with someone is terrifying. Somebody's got to be willing to put themselves out in such an awkward way that you could absolutely be rejected. But until you get to that level of vulnerability, you don't get to have all of the depth and relationship that comes with it. And it might take more than one try. I would even say in my life, I have made friends along the way since I've even met you that have not ended up being lifelong friends. And that's not even like a bash to them. That's not how it worked. Don't give up because you've been burned or hurt or whatever. On a practical side, I would just say that friendship in 2019, there are so many avenues to keep communication and stay in touch, and don't be afraid of those things. I said it earlier, but jokingly, Voxer is one of those, like, we use that app and literally communicate on a regular basis. And then finding those spaces of like, you know, I'm going to speak up in Canada in whatever, a couple of months. And I was like, hey, so if I'm going to be driving, you live in Maine, let's work this out so I can hang out. And that's, to be honest, as the married one with kids, that's probably the hardest for me to work out on my end sometimes, because I'm like, I got to figure out a lot of moving pieces, find those spaces, but also know some of that is just the ongoing connection, whether it's Voxer or FaceTime or whatever it is. Be vulnerable. Like, don't waste energy trying to put on a front. And then don't be afraid to call your friend out if you're like, okay, you're definitely putting a filter, like, what's really going on? Guys, like in any relationship, forgiveness, being willing to give forgiveness and ask for forgiveness, to me, is like a staple in any relationship, but even in friendship. Your girlfriend's gonna hurt you. They're gonna say dumb things. They're gonna do dumb things. And if you can't forgive, then I would be terribly blunt and say you're not going to have great girlfriends, because you're just going to have a trail of broken relationships behind you, because hurt is inevitable. It's going to happen because you're just broken people.
I literally was making a gross face when Bethany said vulnerability, because I hate it. For those of you listening, I just moved to Maine after living in Georgia for a year. So I've had like 2 years in a row of trying to build and find community and family. And listen, like, strangers can't be your therapist, but there is a certain extent of people aren't going to know me if I don't talk about myself. There's just a part of it where if people don't hear some of the vulnerable side of us, then they don't know us. And you can't have that same expectation of other people and expect to know everything about someone if you're not willing to do that. Another thing is as you get to know people, like, I mean, again, Bethany and I, like, it's 18 years. So there's a lot of times that it's taken almost 18 years to realize, like, okay, when she doesn't text back, it's not always personal.
In fact, it rarely ever is.
Yeah. Making friendships here, like, I kind of have to pray into it. Like, God doesn't want to leave you in a mystery. God wants to answer your prayers, and he wants to give you wisdom. And so just like watching people and getting to know people and being like, hey, how do you feel like this happened? Or even being like, hey, you didn't respond to that text and I wasn't sure how to take it. Like, that can be a life-changing statement, because the person might look at you and be like, oh my gosh, there was an emergency, I'm so sorry. Or they could be like, you might find out they're a total jerk, but hey, at least you found out in a polite way and not, you know. And then the other one was, I think, to have a true deep friendship, which again, it can take time, but is you can't compartmentalize your life. I can't think of one like incredibly close, like someone I would have stand up with me at my wedding anyways, that I don't know at least some of the other people in their lives. We've kind of created a culture of like, well, these are my party friends, and then these are the friends that I talk philosophical with, and then and we can't do that. Not if you want to have like a true, deep, solid, healthy friendship. We can't compartmentalize, because then you're not being known.
In wrapping it up, I'm going to give you the opportunity. I will give you the opportunity to either ask 2 questions or give 2 embarrassing facts about me. That
about you.
know,
I thought you were going to say about myself.
No, then I get to give them about you. It's full circle.
You should have given me these ahead of time. Because...
No, you would have had two really good ones. So I need to put you on the spot so you can only think of.
Guys, here's the thing. I say embarrassing moments, but Bethany doesn't actually get embarrassed. So
I love that you have nothing. Okay, let's start.
I'm really mad at you right now.
I know you are. Okay, so embarrassing fact number one. I'm not going to go, obviously, like completely humiliate you, just partially. A fact that I did not believe about Shauna until I learned the hard way was that Shauna, who is a phenomenal singer, amazing vocalist, cannot, I repeat, cannot eat anything before she sings. Otherwise, she will burp through her entire set. I thought, I'm not kidding, when she told me this, that she might have an eating disorder. I'm not even making it. This like a legitimately was like, oh my gosh, talk about being willing to have a hard conversation. Except at that point, I was like, okay, you have to eat. Like I was like, really legitimately thought this was something else going on. And I forced her to eat one time before she was going to sing
a big worship finale, just so we're clear. It was a big worship finale.
Girl burped all through. I felt terrible.
I burped through practice and then burped through.
I felt so bad. Oh, okay. That's like a thing. Okay. Good to know. So I just thought that I would share your burping thing because I think that it's important for people to know. I also think that people should know about you. I'm not sure when this would ever come in handy, but that where most human beings only have fingers on their hands.
I hate you so. I'm so single forever. So single forever now.
Think of how convenient is it that Shauna has fingers on her feet? She can pick up things.
I do not, just so you know.
Okay, I'm sorry, but your toes are basically fingers. They're fingers attached to your feet.
Okay. Just for the record, I'm not like 5'2", okay? I'm a tall person. All right, we're going to switch gears because I've at least thought of one moment.
I figured that would fuel.
It's not really embarrassing, but it was so hilarious. And her husband was there. In fact, her husband's there probably for a lot of
fair enough
kind of moments.
Probably outside the door right now. Let's be real.
So 2000, whatever. I was working at Monadnock. I was actually Andy's assistant for not a full year, but we're still friends.
Let's add that to the list of things you worked through.
Oh, guys, that's another podcast. No, but so we had a kid coming. So Andy and I were kind of talking work one night. Well, I think we were watching The Office, but we were watching a movie or something like that. And Andy and I are talking about what this kid's diagnosis was and who we felt like they should go with. So the term technically isn't used a lot anymore, but the term is Asperger's. And so Andy and I are like, oh, well, because of this, and then, oh, like that. And then Bethany, kid you not, guys, Bethany's, guys. And we're like, oh my gosh, what? Like, we thought something just happened. She was so serious. And she's just like, stop saying he has ass whoopers. That's horrible. And I'm pretty sure Andy almost fell off the couch laughing. I was already on the floor and like started rolling over. I was laughing so hard. And so we literally had to show her the word so that she understood what we were saying.
I literally thought you were making fun of this kid, and I have never in my life, I'd never heard the term Asperger's. And every time you said it, it sounded like you were saying ass whoopers. And I knew the kid was like on the spectrum, but okay, I'm like defending myself in this. I literally was like, you guys are horrible humans. This has been fabulous. Well, at least for me, I don't know if our listeners will care at all. Thanks for coming on and talking friendship with me. And thanks for staying my friend, even when I am a terrible human being and a jerk and all the other things that I've been in the last 18 and a half, 19 years almost?
Yeah, almost. Well, lucky for you, I'm super loyal to the point of fault. So,
all right, I love you. Mostly,
you.
always, the time, all the time.
We need to preface this with Bethany and I will probably speak Enneagram off and on throughout this entire podcast.
I feel the need to tell you that Andy actually has a $1 bet going for every time you refer to the Enneagram. Now I owe him $1. Thanks.